Welcome to episode 137 of the Leader-Post Rider Rumblings podcast. I am Taylor Shire. He is Darrell Davis. We are back for another episode. And Darrell, like Corey Mace said in his post-game press conference after Sunday's win over Hamilton, it's going to be basically a re-recording of last week's podcast because the Riders' latest win, a 33-30 victory over the Hamilton Tiger Cats, kind of followed a similar line to what they did in week one, barely getting by Edmonton late in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, let's just edit it in, right? Hamilton Tiger Cats instead of Edmonton Elks, and it's a lot of similarities, isn't it, Taylor? That the fourth quarter, the Riders were behind and looked like hopeless and helplessly out of the game, and all of a sudden, kaboom! They were down so late in the game, 30 to 20, right? And all of a sudden, they're winning at the very end of the game against Hamilton. They outscored Edmonton 21-3. So, as Corey Mace said, it was kind of funny when he said, it's a cut and paste interview here. And I'm thinking that's hysterical because that's exactly what it is. He has to say the same thing, and he's just as mad about so many things, the defensive busts in their coverage, the bad penalties. Why didn't they start their offense earlier? But they won.
Yeah, and to me, seeing what they did in Edmonton in week one, I wasn't too surprised about this sort of second half resurgence, fourth quarter kind of comeback that they had it in them. Because we saw it in week one, but after the first half, they had one touchdown to show for all of their possessions on offense and really didn't look that good. But yeah, well, again, I just sort of went back to the week prior and what they did against Edmonton and didn't count them out. And even asking Trevor Harris post-game what was said in the locker room, he said the same thing at halftime, that, don't count us out. It was only 20-7 at that point. He kind of rallied the troops and they basically flipped a switch in the third quarter, came out really, really strong in the third quarter, and then put together that touchdown drive with 2:12 left in the game. I mean, probably should have went to overtime. I really don't see how in any shape. Like I'm going to say Hamilton probably would have had a good chance. I don't know what the odds would have been, but a good chance to march down, 30, 40 yards and kick a game-winning field goal. So I feel like the Riders are quite fortunate that Tim White bobbled that ball into the hands of CJ Avery, and then of course they had to kick that field goal to win, which like I said, I think fortunate win, more fortunate than what they did against Edmonton. I feel like they earned that victory against Edmonton. I feel like this latest win was kind of handed to them in a sense.
Yeah, Tim White, leading receiver in the CFL last year, has dropped a lot of balls this year. He dropped 2 against Saskatchewan, including that crucial one at the end. And his quarterback, Bo Levi Mitchell, is starting to look like he's got some spark again. So you're right, Taylor. I thought the Tiger Cats were ready to march at least into field goal range. Mark Leggio, their kicker, had been pretty accurate. I thought the Riders were in deep trouble, but funny how things bounce sometimes. When I wrote about it in my column, I'd call it a mystery or a magic. I don't even know. Try to explain how it happened. There's no reason for that to happen. They just... Was it luck? Yeah, maybe, but they're in the right spots, and maybe it's karma. I have no idea. I'm running out of words, and I don't know if they want to keep doing it that way. It's pretty heart-wrenching for them and tough on your guts, I think, to watch if you're a fan of the Rough Riders. But if they're winning, man, you know what? As a coach, when you see Corey Mace say, I've got all these things to work on, it's probably a bit of an advantage. You say, look, we need all these to clean up all these things, but we are 2-0. And so everybody's in a good mood and say, okay, we'll go work on that. Let's go work on that. And he'll probably get a lot of buy-in because of it.
And good teams find a way to win. And like he said, they found a way. And I think that's really what it comes down to is, similar to last season, they somehow managed to start 3-1 when we said at the time they very well could have been 0-4 to start the year last year. Now they're 2-0 this year. Really, a few plays out of their way, they could be 0-2. Then the sky would be falling if you consider all the penalties and some of the mistakes, the busting coverage that they had this past week. If they were 0-2, it would be a whole different vibe. Obviously, not winning, a whole different vibe, and the sky would be falling just based on execution and how they've looked in some of the games. But yeah, they've found ways to win.
Yeah, that's how it works in Saskatchewan, right? It's either boom or bust, and everybody would be all over these guys if they played exactly the same way and lost, and they certainly could be, but they've pulled them out. And when you say good teams win tough games like this, yes, probably. I don't think they played the league's best teams, though. I don't think Hamilton and Edmonton are among the top teams. You see promise among both teams, but I don't think that they're going to be top rated. So to get those 2 wins out of the way, It's great for the Roughriders. They got another chance against Hamilton coming up at Mosaic Stadium again in the rematch. So they could technically be 3-0, which would be a pretty nice flying start for them. But as you say, a flip of the coin or a gust of wind in the other direction, and who knows, they could be looking down a different
and we talked
barrel.
about it, I think, in the lead up to week 1, that this could be a stretch where Saskatchewan could start 3-0. I don't imagine neither of us had predicted they would come in victories like this. I thought maybe a little bit more clean. They would have played against Hamilton. The Edmonton game, I think, was pretty predictable based on, the matchup that was at hand. But I feel like Saskatchewan is a much better team than Hamilton. I don't think they really showed it. Obviously, they got the win, and I think they're going to carry some momentum into the rematch. But I still think it wasn't really the way that we thought they might have won. AJ Ouellette had 32 rushing yards, and the defense had a bunch of busts in coverage. Bo Levi Mitchell passed for 380 yards. Trevor Harris, of course, had 2 touchdowns to Kean Schaefer-Baker and 390 yards. But you look at sort of those other things that they would have been keying in on Saskatchewan, and it really didn't go the way I would have thought.
You mentioned 2 things there that I want to ask you about. The AJ Ouellette's averaging 2.3 yards per carry, and the defensive bus behind what looked like Marcus Sales, the new corner who came in, former All-Star, just joined the team, and they added him late to the roster, and they're a little juggling. Which one of those concerns you the most? Concerns you more, I'm sorry, because we're preparing one of the
other. For AJ Ouellette, I was sort of somewhat concerned after week 1. I think he also had 30-some rushing yards, and he carried the ball 18 times. Obviously, they went away from the running game against Hamilton because it just frankly wasn't working. He still caught the ball out of the backfield. I think he was still an effective blocker, and they still found a way to get it done through the air. So I'm not overly concerned about the run game, because as long as they have production in one facet of the offense, I think they'll be fine. Obviously, you want both, but that's not always going to happen. And I think he'll be due for a breakout game this season, whether it's this week or in a couple weeks after they get back from the bye week. So I'm not really concerned about the run game. Obviously, they paid a bunch of money to a guy to come in here and be that star running back to 100 yards a game, every game, 1,000 yards in the season, that type of guy. And I don't know if he's obviously not on pace for that right now. I don't know if he's going to be, if he's going to get back on that pace, or if it's just going to be, say, 800 yards this season, a few touchdowns here and there, and be kind of that middle of the road running back. I don't necessarily think he's we have to see something different if he's going to be an all-star, basically, from him and from the offensive line in front of him. But to answer your question, I would say my issue is certainly with the secondary, and if Marcus Sales is the answer, we'll have to see if he's going to be back at that position this week. They moved around the combo. You wrote about it last week. They decided to switch it up even after winning, which you don't see too often, defensive adjustments. So I'll be interested to see what adjustments they make in the secondary, because I think that's their biggest issue right now.
It is. They've given up 360 and 300 or 340 and 390, 380 yards. That's a lot of passes completed, a lot of deep field coverage that's either blew up or just wasn't close enough. So yeah, that is a concern. And to me, we've talked about this before. The defensive backfield becomes a lot better if you're getting a good pass rush, right? Because the quarterback doesn't have as much time to throw the football. The pass rush hasn't been what we expected of it either. We can say the secondary struggled. Yes, they have, but they got to put some pressure on the quarterbacks, and they're not. Anthony Lanier made a nice play and got a helmet on the football, caused a fumble. But Micah Johnson, who is, as far as I'm concerned, still a great player. So is Anthony Lanier and Brian Cox and Christian Albright and Malik Henry, the guys who we're expecting to see in the backfield a little bit, aren't getting to the quarterback. They're just rushing for a lot. Well, you know what? They tried a lot more blitzes in game 2, didn't they? And they're still not getting to the quarterback. So I don't know what they're going to have to do, but they need to get more pressure. And if they don't get it on Bo Levi Mitchell this coming game, then he might shred them again for 380 yards.
Yeah, the one positive that you can see is that the defensive line has a good run game protection, right? They only limited or they held James Butler to 27 yards, I believe it was. So I feel like the run game defense was strong, but yeah, they just didn't have enough pressure. Obviously, no sacks in the game, which isn't a great stat line, but yeah, you mentioned you get pressure on the quarterback. It helps out the the defensive backs, and I think that that's kind of where it stems from. It always starts in the trenches and works its way backwards. So it forces the defensive backs to make those plays or get shredded when the quarterback has that much time.
Mm-hmm. Nice job by the linebackers. I thought Avery made that late interception. 2 in 2 games in the fourth quarter, which is interesting. CJ Rivas seems to be around the ball on the other side, and Jameer Thurman comes up and makes some serious hits in the middle. So the point you make about stopping the run, after Butler ran for 120 yards or something in his first game when they beat Calgary, and then he gets 27 or 28 the next time. So the Rough Riders keyed on it, and they made Hamilton one-dimensional, as was Saskatchewan's offense one-dimensional, but they're both able to pass. And I think that one of these teams or either team is going to have to, especially the Rough Riders, because that's who we talk about the most, is going to have to break out that running game. That play-action pass worked very well early in the game against Hamilton because Hamilton's respecting the run, but they shut down Ouellette so quickly, so well, and so effectively that the play-action pass didn't work anymore, and they were getting more pressure on him. That Harris made some nice plays, but he's not capable of moving around the pocket. He hasn't run the football even once in 2 games. So the Rough Riders are going to have to diversify a little bit, and the only way they can do that is by getting A.J. Ouellette into the game a little bit, running the ball, or maybe add Ratkovich and use a little 2-back set every once in a while. But they've got to be able to carry that football because if Trevor Harris is being counted on just to throw, he's going to drop 3, 5, or 7 steps, and he's straight back there, and he's a pretty easy target for oncoming defensive linemen.
I feel like as we're talking and as we're sort of critiquing them, it doesn't seem like they should be 2-0 right now based on all the things that we're picking apart. It's quite crazy, but they sort of just jump on the back of Trevor Harris. He leads them to these, fourth quarter comebacks. And I think as Trevor Harris goes this year, the Riders will go this year because another concern I had, and I don't know if you agree, but I think they had 11 penalties for 115 yards a week after they had a bunch of penalties. And Corey May said he was going to, talk about discipline, talk about accountability, correct all those things in the week leading up to the Hamilton game, but then they put up 115 yards of penalties.
Yeah, it was funny. What was it? Mario Brown. What's the defensive lineman who got in all the trouble? Miles Brown, right? Went a little bit wild on the field, and all the players he took a offsetting penalty with an opponent, and everybody came up to him, and he's yelling kind of, "Oh no, he did something to me," and Corey Mace, the head coach, is saying, "Okay, you shouldn't react to it." And all of his teammates started coming in, which is what Corey Mace is after, to say, "Listen, I don't care if he kicked you in the stomach. You can't do anything about this. Just play the game and don't take penalties." That message has to get through. It's one that Corey Mace has been preaching since even before he took these guys to training camp. And why isn't it getting through? You're right, we're picking on things, but they're doing the same thing. They've won two games, and if we sit here and nitpick them a little bit, it's exactly what the coaches are doing too, Taylor, I think. So I think we're being fair about this. They cannot take those penalties that you spoke about, can they?
Yeah, and a lot of them I think are preventable. There's some, obviously, that, like May said after the game, there's speed of the game penalties where they aren't really preventable, but there was, I think, lots. I don't know if all 11, but certainly 8 or 9 of them were preventable and are preventable, and they need to get fixed because eventually it's going to cost them. One of these penalties is gonna.
They're dead ball fouls, right? It's after the play, and you just can't take those penalties. The weirdest one we have to talk about, though, right? The weird penalty that ended up, and it was kind of after the play foul because Lanier knocked the ball loose from Butler, the running back, and the ball bounces to CJ Rivas, a linebacker for the Rough Riders, whose helmet has been knocked off earlier in the play. He recovers it, and you think, oh, what a huge turnover that is. They go to video review, and they say, sorry, he can't participate in a play because his helmet is off. The call was right, wasn't it? How logical was it?
Yeah, it's unfortunate, I think, would be the best way to describe it, but, it was the right call. I sort of thought about it when I was watching. I thought about, in hockey, if you get your helmet knocked off and, obviously you can't participate in the play. So if you're in front of the net and you get your helmet ripped off and the puck comes to you and you just tip a puck in as you get your helmet knocked off, it's going to be no goal because you don't have a helmet. So football follows the same thing. You can't really participate in the play or you can't make a play. But we've seen guys participate in tackles and make a tackle or sort of be involved after the play. And I don't know if they've always been flagged over, every time.
I don't remember any.
You see a receiver who gets their helmet ripped off during the play, and I don't know if it's they don't lose the first down. It's not necessarily his fault because he gets it ripped off. So I was interested to see how they would rule it at the time, but when they ruled it, it sort of made sense.
Yeah,
because it is the rule.
Hamilton would say, well, he can't recover it because he shouldn't be in the play. Your point about a receiver who gets the helmet ripped off while he's already in the play. So, but Revis, the ball just came to him, and it's not as if you can use that hockey example. And Revis said, "Oh, I have to leave the field now. I'm going to run off out to get out of the way of the play." The ball just landed in his hands, and it looked to be a huge spot for the Roughriders when they create a big turnover, but they were able to overcome that, which they've done pretty well, pretty admirably. They've had some things go against them in both games, and the resiliency and their ability to bounce back, to me, Taylor, has been the most impressive thing about the Roughriders this year, hasn't it?
Yeah, and honestly, that play when that fumble was overruled, that felt like the turning point because Hamilton scored a touchdown 2 plays later. And I thought, oh boy,
after a double reverse.
I thought, okay, this is that's the backbreaker. This is the turning point. This is where the game goes the other way. Obviously, it wasn't the case, but at the time, that just felt like and I imagine on the sideline they would have been probably quite deflated after not getting that call go their way.
True enough, but they seem to be bouncing back. And Corey Mace on the sidelines looks calmer. He's he's wondering if he's making the right calls. It seems to be he's in the right position. He's just got to get some more pressure from his front line, and he seems to be. I don't think there's any real strategic errors on his part yet. He seems to be in tune with the game and how it's going. Of course, he's going to assess himself all the time. The person we're hearing a lot of raves about is the offensive coordinator. Trevor Harris says it after every game. Mark Mueller, the great offensive coordinator, a rising star in this league, but he has done a pretty good job, hasn't he?
From what I could tell, obviously the passing game, but I don't know about the run game. He stuck with the run last week and kind of went away from it this week. But yeah, I feel like there's a different sort of, I don't know, aura around the offense and the passing game. We're not used to those kind of short yardage dump passes like we've been used to the last couple of seasons here. Obviously, totally different offensive coordinators those last 2 years, but I feel like it just had the same sort of makeup. And then this year, I think you just look at that final drive and how they attacked it and some of those plays that they made. Stearns going up over the middle to make that catch, just having the guts to make that call, make that throw, and ultimately Stearns to make that catch. So I think 3 guys get a lot of praise for that play alone and just how they drew it up. They had to bring in Mario Alford into the game, and they went to him right away. I didn't mind that first call when they tried to just hit Alford down the seam right when he got into the game. He wasn't open. So I didn't think that ball needed to be thrown to him, but I liked the route and the play. And then Alford had a nice play that was for a first down a couple of plays later that was reviewed, but it was a catch. He got the bottom of his hand underneath the ball. So, and that's another thing for Mark Mueller to get some praise because he made do with what he had in the game. He lost his top receiver, Sean Bain. Jarrett Stearns got hurt.
Blake a guard too.
Philip Blake got hurt. So I feel like, Harris obviously gets a lot of credit, but Mark Mueller, I think, for probably the week of preparation too, and even back to training camp in a few weeks, but getting these guys ready to play the position that they're going to be called to play. I think Trevor Harris said post-game that MLS hadn't played that receiver position yet, but he knew enough from the playbook that he was able to play that position seamlessly.
And Ajo coming in too, right? So they got a little bit out of everybody. You made a great point about the good catch by Alfred. That Jarrett Stearns catch was very brave and second and 17, and he gets an 18-yard catch because he knows right where the yardsticks are. That came after a sack. And I keep trying to find these numbers because teams that get a quarterback sacked during a drive almost never score a touchdown. So suddenly they go 88 yards in 8 plays, and they start basically on their own 10-yard line because they've got a 7-yard sack to start with. The way that they were able to climb out of that hole was one of those things we talk about with the Roughriders, how capable they are of doing that. And that's partly Mark Mueller, it's partly Trevor Harris, it's partly the brave guys around him, and starting with the Jarrett Stearns catch. And then obviously Keon Schaefer-Baker, what a good player he is, and what good catches he made, and brave going across the middle too. So you make a great point, Taylor, that these guys played and did what they had to do at the end of the game to win it.
Yeah, the stat is out there. I don't know what it is, but it's high 90s that if you take a sack on the first play, it's more likely not going to be a touchdown. It's high 90s. I don't know what it exactly is. We'll have to look it up. I'm sure it'll happen again.
They don't care about stats. I wrote that in my column today. They defy all statistics anyhow, the way they're going.
I think the one stat that I will touch on, I wrote about it a little bit last week with Brett Lothar going 4 for 4, got that game-winning field goal. None of those were gimmies too, but he came through in the clutch. He didn't kick a field goal at all last week, which was quite surprising. First time that happened in a while. But to go 4 for 4 and to make that field goal with no time on the clock, I think was obviously a huge moment in the game and a big one for him in his career.
You're right. He's pretty clutch late in the games, isn't he? I don't know if that stat's correct, and we'll have to check that one. It means like he's 11 for 11 when it's a game-changing kick in the last 3 minutes. So he makes them when he has to. I know he got hurt a little bit in the preseason. He was hurt a little bit early last season too and struggled to start with. But boy, talking about a reliable kicker when you need him. And it was just, I guess we were wondering because he hadn't kicked that first game, and when he stepped out on the field for that game winner on Sunday, he's thinking, well, he hasn't done very much. How's he doing? Well, he made the first one and he made the second one. And I know that he's often the target, as kickers are, for people saying, oh, come on, you got to make those. He made them when he needs to, and I think they can count on him. It looks that way.
Yeah, and like I said, I talked with him last week, and I think there were some concerns about his preseason performance because I think he was 3 for 5 and then 2 for 4 in the games.
Yeah.
But as I wrote about, he was using those microchip footballs, which were completely unpredictable, as he said. So I think a lot of those misses in the preseason were because of those microchip footballs. It's hard to blame, but that specifically. But I think it can take a lot of the blame. And the one interesting thing that he told me about is that in the Edmonton game, the first game, Boris Beattie was using the chip balls because they had chosen to use the chip balls, and Brett didn't. And Brett thinks that, and this is a guess, an educated guess, I guess, from a kicker, but that one kick that Boris Beattie missed, I think from 48 yards, he thinks that was because of the chip ball. It just wasn't a predictable kick that, I'm sure Boris is up in the high 80s as a percentage from that distance. It was just uncharacteristic for Beattie to miss a field goal like that. So Brett thinks it was the chip ball's problem.
Well,
we'll never know.
If a kicker has it in his head, he's going to be okay. He's usually okay.
Yeah.
If they've got something else going on, it's like you and me standing on the tee box going, "Oh, don't hit it right." There goes right.
It's going to go right. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So they play Hamilton again. We were talking earlier. They play again Sunday, which is an interesting match, home and home. It's not going to be the same, is it? It can't be.
No, I think actually, the Saskatchewan will have a bit of a spark. It'll be interesting to see what the injuries to Blake and Bain are, if they're going to be back at practice, if they're going to play. I think the Blake injury looked to be more serious. There was no concrete answer after the game on either of them. I think it sounds like Stearns did return to the game late, so he'll be fine. Bain, we'll see, and Blake, we'll see. I don't know if Ryan Sevier is going to be the answer. I feel like he was just okay filling in for guard. So do they bring in somebody else? From the practice roster, say a guy like Zach Fry, did they plug him in potentially? So I feel like that's going to be the biggest thing this week is do they find replacements for those two receivers? I think Ajo is certainly a capable replacement for Bain, or if they slide MLS over and then Ajo goes in for Bain for MLS. So obviously injuries will be a talking point in this week of practice, but I think they're carrying momentum, and anytime you're playing at home, you're going to get a boost as well.
That's true. Their confidence must be sky high. They say, well, listen, we can mess things up as long as we're close in the fourth quarter. I guess that's not a bad attitude to have, is it?
That's right. All right. Well, that's it for this episode, 137 of the Rider Rumblings podcast. Saskatchewan out to a 2-0 start, and they will have Hamilton again on Sunday. Darrell, thanks again for joining me.
You bet, Taylor. Always fun to talk.